We are live. Welcome to everyone
Hello.
to another workshop.
Yes.
Dr. Scott Wright, how are you tonight?
I'm doing well. How are you, Rachel Grubbs?
I'm very good.
Good.
So as we've got folks starting to log on, I say hello to some people. I see
Yes.
hi Swagger.
Howdy.
Hi Lynette. I like that someone has typed in good vibes.
Right.
They feel that.
Absolutely. Awesome. Awesome.
So type in the chat, where are you guys watching from today?
Yeah. We'd like to know everywhere that people are. So
yeah, either your town or your school or both.
Yeah.
Hi Mila. Hi David. Hi Caitlin. Hi Jessica.
Yay. A lot of good people. So this is fantastic. Very cool.
Well, here we go.
California.
Mesa, Arizona, San Antonio, Texas.
Coastal Carolina University, y'all won your football game last night against University of Louisiana. Woohoo.
Austin, Texas, much like our speaker.
Yes, that's where I am. See, I have my shirt on. It says Austin City Limits.
Nice. Got some New Yorkers. Got some other Arizonas. Cumberland, Maryland. Now it's Cumberland on the, are you on the Bay side or are you on the mainland side?
Oh, wow. Knoxville, Tennessee. Go Vols. Keep Austin weird. Yay. Of course. Love it. Love it.
All right. Well, as people are starting to log in, we'll go ahead and get started. I just wanted to say hey to folks, give them some time.
Yeah.
So this is week 2 in a 7-week series. So some of you may have been here last week live or watched the replay. Some of you may have been new. My name is Rachel Grubbs. I am one of the co-founders along with Dr. Ryan Gray of MAPT. And this series is a free workshop created by my co-host here, Dr. Scott Wright. And, you know, the thing that we're trying to get into tonight, we hope is something a little different than what you normally hear. We're trying to help you think about the attributes and the qualities that create strong doctors and not just the numbers, not just the stats.
That's exactly right.
So that's what you're going to be hearing about for the next 30 to 45 minutes. I'm mostly going to be off screen so that I can just help answer questions in chat. We will do a Q&A towards the end. I wanted to take a minute and, oh, did we miss the Dr. Wright slide?
Yeah, I figured everybody knew already who I was, and so maybe I should have.
Yeah, they might. I'm going to go ahead and introduce you again anyway.
Okay.
I was going to give you guys a slide with Scott on it, but instead I'll just chat. So for those of you who don't know, Dr. Scott Wright is a former director of admissions from UT Southwestern Med School. He also served as Dean of Undergraduate Education and Director of the Pre-Health Advising Office at University of Texas, Dallas. And he served as the Executive Director of TMDSAS. So this fellow we have here, let me put a spotlight on you. He's so cute. This is somebody who has been helping pre-meds both as aspiring physicians and as people who are applicants for a long time. He's seen thousands of applicants. And then the thing I mentioned last week that I'll say again is one of the things I just really enjoy about Scott is that he has such a talent for being nice while being straight. So a straight shooter is what I mean, like talking directly. And I think that, you know, some of the path to being a pre-med is really hard, and sometimes we have to hear hard truths, but I love that Scott can deliver them in a way that leaves you with hope. So I think we're going to have fun tonight and learn a lot, and I will be hanging out with you guys in the comments. I'll let you take it from here, Scott.
Very good. Well, welcome everyone. I'm excited about being here tonight with you guys, and very excited about what we're going to do over the next hour, 30 minutes, 45 minutes or so, while we talk together. So if you were attending last week, we talked about generally, the 6 personal traits, I kind of went through them, correlated them with the AAMC core competencies. And so on the next slide, we really see that the core competencies as identified by the Association of American Medical Colleges are these. And so each week we're going to be doing something with regard to these core competencies. They are, as you see here, service orientation, social skills, cultural competence, teamwork, oral communication, ethical responsibility to yourself and to others, reliability, dependability, resilience and adaptability, and the capacity for improvement. And anything that you do in your journey could have an illustration of a strength in one or multiple of these areas. And so what I have done is to try to compact these into what I think are 6 qualities, 6 personal characteristics or traits that really represent areas involved in these pre-professional competencies that you see here. And so those 6 areas are on the next slide that we talked about a little last week. They are altruism, humility, self-awareness, autonomy, accountability, and a growth orientation. So last week we spent our time talking about altruism and about the importance of being others-focused, of being others-centered, as opposed to me-centered, as opposed to self-centered. We talked about the importance of others in our lives, and what that meant and how that looked in reality. So tonight, what we're going to talk about is humility, is the personal trait focused on this next slide of humility, and how that kind of works its way into our lives, what that means, what that's all about, how it's expressed in attributes in our personality, in our lives, but also how it's expressed in our behaviors, and the importance of that in healthcare. We'll talk about that as well. So humility, and this is a term I think that is compact and is misunderstood often about really what humility is and what it is not. And so we need to talk about this and really get down into some nitty-gritty about what this is all about. So in the next slide, we're going to really see how we're going to define this term. So humility can be defined as having a modest or low view of your own importance. Modest or low view. And I really like this word modest. I think we can connect to this idea of modesty. The word comes from the Latin. Literally, it means low or on the ground. And you can kind of get the image. I like the image of being on the ground. The lowness of being on the ground is as we might be, in times of old when the subjects of the monarch might bow to the monarch, or even get down on the ground in front of the monarch, the king or queen or duke or whatever, emperor, to express their lowness in the face of the monarch. This is the imagery here. And again, I think these words like unpretentious, modesty, even down to earth or unassuming, these are good words that are synonyms of humility, and really kind of reach into giving us an idea closer about what this word really means. I think you may have heard the phrase, he or she was eating humble pie. Maybe you haven't heard that phrase before. This dates back way back to into the early 1800s, and it really means somebody who lowers themselves. And it comes from the medieval or feudal times when the lower classes of the population had to eat the inner parts of the animal as opposed to the meat of the animal that were left. It was whatever was left over of the animal is what they were able to eat. And these inner parts of the animal were called the umbels of the animal. And this is really indicative of a low station of life. So when you say, well, I was eating humble pie, or I was eating humble pie, then this is an illustration or a way to express that I was lowering myself, or I was really sort of modest in my aspirations, or whatever. Now, what the concept of humility does not necessarily mean is to debase yourself, and I want to draw a clear distinction there. What we're not talking about is humiliation. What we're talking about here is the importance, suggesting that the most important person in the world is not you. Going back to our concept of altruism, the most important person is not you, but it's someone else. It's sharing. It's not. It's like I heard this phrase one time, which said, you are not starring in your own movie in which everyone else is an extra. And we all know people like that, who they're all about them, and everything revolves around them. Everything is self-centered, and it's like everybody else in the world is just an extra in their own movie that's all about them. And that's not what we're talking about here. What we're talking about is acknowledging the lowness of me as an individual in a concept where I will put myself in the back seat intentionally. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that. In fact, humility, if you look at every really major religious tradition in the world, humility is a key concept in those religious traditions. Whether we're talking about Christianity, Judaism, Islam, Buddhism, they all have this concept of humility as an important concept in their religious tradition. And so there's a key here about what this means, and we're going to talk here in a few minutes about how important that is in terms of healthcare. So the next slide, really, I want to cover this really carefully, is or what are the attributes of humility? What does it mean? What does this look like in terms of my personality or how I come across to other people? And I want to go through each one of these in a little bit of detail so that we understand it. A person who is humble is gentle, meaning they deal sincerely but very gently with the people around them. And this is not really at all to be confused with weakness. Humility is not about strength or weakness. It is about a variety of things that we're going to cover here, but especially in terms of gentleness. There always be a balance in our lives between gentleness and strength of character or strength of purpose. Now, I have a friend who is a great guy, but he often expresses himself in not very gentle ways when he's dealing, for example, with someone at a convenience store or at the market who something happens and he kind of flies off the handle, and this is not gentleness. This is not an expression of humility. But part of humility is this attribute of being a very gentle person. Humble people are also willing to admit their own mistakes. Someone that is humble is readily willing, and listen to this, to admit when they've done something wrong. Humble people typically deal with the consequences of their mistakes without, making excuses or blaming somebody else. Kids are really good at this, not at sort of diverting the the blame for something away. You involve yourself with little children, and all of a sudden something happens, and the first reaction they have is, she did it, or it was her fault, or he was the one that made me do it, or whatever. A humble person is willing to say, is to own when there's a mistake, and when they made a mistake, they're willing to say, I made a mistake here. A humble person also is forgiving, and I love this concept. It means that we don't hold grudges, that we forgive others around us, and that we don't keep track of the mistakes of other people. It means that we're willing to forgive someone when they have wronged us, or when something has gone wrong. And what that means is that we're willing to take on and remember that others have forgiven us in the past. It's this recognition of, just as I've been forgiven for things that I've done in my past, I'm going to be forgiving. And even to the point where it's difficult to do that. Often forgiveness takes a lot of intentionality, because we don't want to forgive. Somebody's hurt us. Sometimes the last thing we want to do is forgive them and forget about it. But a humble person is willing to do that, is willing to say, I forgive you. A humble person diverts attention. And I really like this one, particularly noting that that physicians are the leaders of the healthcare team. A humble person almost always is a leader who diverts attention by sharing recognition with others. Doesn't take all the credit for themselves, but shares that attention, shares that credit, shares that recognition with others around them. They're able to celebrate the success of others rather than hoarding or getting the publicity or the adulation that comes with success. So we divert, as humble people, we divert attention, and I want to really focus attention on this one in particular, with regard to healthcare, because as physicians, you work with people on the healthcare team constantly, and they are hard workers, whether it's nurses or physician's assistants, or radiological technicians, or nurses' assistants, or physical therapists, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You can go down the line. These are all hardworking people who deserve credit for helping the patient with their needs, and we need to acknowledge that in the process of caring for our patients. This is a great one. Humble people are very thankful people. Humble people recognize that others contribute to our lives and thank them and are grateful for what others do in our lives. I think that sometimes we don't acknowledge the people around us and what importance they have in our lives. And so we need to be grateful people, grateful in ways that really acknowledge the contribution that others have in what we do. And this is not sort of feigned for thankfulness, but it is really sincere, genuine, authentic gratefulness, authentic thankful attitude to those around us. And I think sometimes this even reaches down to the family of the patient as well as the patient themselves. Thankful that the patient has taken the steps necessary to help in their own care. Thankful for family members supporting the patient in their efforts or in their needs or whatever. I think that's a crucial part of healthcare in the 21st century is being thankful for those around us, but even generally in everyday life. I mean, these things that we're talking about here contribute to us having a much better quality of life. It's going to contribute also to us having a much better quality of work life, and contribute to the patient feeling better about themselves. Finally, as an attribute of humility, a humble person invites feedback. A humble person really is one that seeks to learn from their own mistakes, that asks for the contribution of others, invites others to constructively criticize them in what they're doing, and to figure out, how do I take this constructive criticism and this input from others, and how do I grow out of that? Now that takes a lot. That definitely takes humility to reach out to somebody and say, can you give me input about where are my strengths and weaknesses? What am I doing well? And what do I need to work on? And we often don't like to, we don't often like to hear that, but I think it's a very, very crucial part. And when we get to a couple of the other personal traits in weeks to come, we'll talk more about that invitation for feedback and how important that is. Now, the next slide really shows how these attributes get worked out behaviorally. And what I want to say first of all is that these are countercultural. American society is not built around humility. It is built around me pushing myself into situations, me taking the old concept is pulling my boots up by the bootstraps and getting on my horse and riding into the future and trampling those that stand in front of me, etc. But I think in terms of behaviorally, humility is really in that way countercultural. And so here's some examples that I think really go to the heart of how this gets expressed in healthcare. Humble people listen more than they talk. Now, some of us innately are good listeners, and are very good listeners, and others of us honestly are not. And but this is a key quality of a physician. And I think it's important to recognize that in the world of healthcare, as is in our daily lives, we need to be listening to people, particularly when it comes to the patient. We need to listen to what the patient is saying and what the patient is not saying. That is often a bigger telltale sign than what they say is what they do not say. We need to give compliments to those people around us frequently, overwhelmingly, liberally. Give compliments. Thank them for what they're doing. I think everybody loves to hear a compliment. You look great today, or I loved it when you did that one thing the other day and helped that person, or whatever it might be. You have a great sense of humor, and I love your sense of humor. When you laugh, it makes me want to laugh. Give compliments to others. This takes the focus off of me and puts the focus on you. We all love to hear compliments, but it takes humbling ourselves to be able to do that. We intentionally choose perhaps to go last. Now, nobody likes to go last. This goes back to elementary school when we were lining up at the teacher's room door to go to lunch or recess or whatever, and everybody wanted to be first in line. I want to be first. I want to be the leader. But sometimes this means taking the back seat. Perhaps it's in a team situation where somebody else is taking the front, and me being willing to take the back seat in that team situation occasionally to acknowledge that somebody else has good ideas too. And I love this last one. It is being able to talk and, in particular, laugh about embarrassing events, times, or times in your life. We all have things that we do where it's super embarrassing. It's one of those things, you're walking across campus and you're not watching where you're going, and there's the sidewalk is like up a little bit, and you catch your foot on it and you fall down or you trip or whatever, and it's super embarrassing, and we get embarrassed and others around us, oh gosh, look at those people saw me or whatever. That's sort of a typical example of what that might look like. But a humble person can really laugh at that and laugh at, oh my gosh, I can't believe I did that, or how silly am I, or whatever. This goes back to also to the issue of acknowledging when we make mistakes and being able to sometimes laugh about it. A friend of mine the other day works at a hardware store, one of these big, at Lowe's or Home Depot or places like that. And one of the things that he does is he mixes the paint for the customer into the color that they want. And he said the other day he does this every now and then. He said he didn't get the lid on quite right, and when he put it in the machine that mixes it, that shakes it up, it went everywhere. And he said, I had lavender paint all over me, and it was all over everywhere. And he said, at one point, finally, you just have to kind of stand back and laugh about that. And there's really not much else you can do. That takes humility to be able to do that and not get all like, oh, I'm mad or defensive or whatever about something. But it takes humility to be able to smile at that and say, oh, I goofed up. That was goofy, and I shouldn't have done that. Now let's correlate this issue of humility to the AAMC competencies. And I think there are 3 areas where these can be correlated. Much like last week, we correlated altruism to social skills. We're going to do the same with humility this week. And we demonstrate as a humble person social skills by an awareness of others, of the needs and goals. This is why I said that humility and altruism are very closely related to each other. That we recognize that people's interactions and behaviors give us clues about what's affecting them and how they're feeling or whatever. We adjust our behavior in response to these clues, and this is a humbling of ourselves to say, I'm going to adjust my behavior because of something that you're doing or saying or not doing. I'm gonna make an adjustment there. This is about being emotionally intelligent. Some of you may be familiar with the concept of emotional intelligence, and this is taking these cues, these social behavioral cues, and adjusting my behavior to meet theirs. And it really is also about treating others with dignity and respect. This is a key aspect of healthcare in terms of how we treat the patient. We treat our patients constantly and consistently with respect and dignity. Very important in terms of patient care. The second correlated core competency is that of cultural competence. And this is very important in our society today because we live in a multicultural society. In the United States, we have people from all over, and as physicians, you are going to deal with people from various cultures. No matter, they're going to be from all over the world. Perhaps they grew up in the United States, but they are from different traditions, different areas of the country, obviously have different cultural traditions. But we demonstrate the knowledge of sociocultural factors that really affect how we behave and acknowledge that. And I can tell you that cultural issues, cultural factors definitely have an impact on how people relate to their physician and to healthcare in general. Some people are mistrustful of doctors or of healthcare environments. Some people are very subservient to their doctor, and others are aggressive and reach out and question the doctor, which takes a lot of humility to be questioned. But we learn how to deal with those sociocultural factors because we have knowledge of them. This is why I think it's important for there to be a diversity in our healthcare institutions such as in medical schools. It's why medical schools look for a diversity in the class, whether that is racial, ethnic diversity, or whether it's gender diversity or sexual orientation, background of other types. Diversity is very important because it gives us a sense of the differences that are around us and how we approach things in very different ways. Not only do we acknowledge these, but we reach out to appreciate and respect um, different cultures and the importance of diversity. And I really think that this third bullet point is very important, and that is we recognize and we appropriately address bias in ourselves. We all have biases. We all have biases that we work through. And so we have to recognize those, and we engage with those that are different from us, and we try to see their perspective on whatever it is, on an event or an issue or whatever. But it takes humility to be able to do that, to recognize that I have a bias built into me innately. I'm biased because of because of how I was raised, where I was raised, etc. And I recognize that, and I work with others to learn about their biases and their culture and how it competes with mine, and how we work together for the benefit of the patient and the well-being of the patient. The last one is oral communication, and the correlation to the AAMC competencies, that of oral communication. And this is also an important thing, because it is through oral communication that we express humility often. Now, I said before that listening effectively is a very important quality of being a strong physician. And we have to recognize that, again, I have to humble myself sometimes. I have to be altruistic and recognize that the importance of others in order to be willing to listen to their perspective or listen to their needs or their desires. And I think this is a key notion that comes out frequently in healthcare, of how important it is to be able to communicate well as a physician. There's a great quote on the next slide that I want to really go through that really indicates, I think, some of these important things that we're talking about. This is from the Canadian Medical Journal back in 2010, but very applicable always. And look at this. If all we see is the illness, patients may feel that the essence of who they are is being overlooked. If we are distracted, patients may feel unworthy of our attention. If we are too rushed, patients may feel undeserving of our time. And if we deem ourselves more important, patients may feel that they are unimportant. Physicians who lack humility talk at their patients. Physicians who are sufficiently humble talk with their patients. I love this quote because it really reaches the essence of what I'm talking about with regard to humility in a healthcare setting. This is about physicians who are seeing the patient and not the illness. Physicians who are not distracted when they're dealing with the patient. Physicians who are not rushed. Rush in the room, rush out of the room, but who take time to deal with their patients. And who recognize that the most important person in the room, in the exam room, is the patient, not the doctor. Patients are the most important. Physicians who lack humility talk at their patients. We've had that. I've had that experience before. It's not fun. We've all probably had that experience. Physicians who are sufficiently humble talk with their patients. Now, I've chosen, as I did last week, I've chosen a piece of artwork and to express how I feel about this particular piece, this particular um, attribute. Excuse me, attribute. And this is this painting is entitled "Humility." It's by Annie Francis Lee, who's a very celebrated painter of African American culture, and it really shows an emotional scene of one woman humbling herself by washing the feet of another woman. This is really often a behavior or an act that's related in literature to humility, to humbling oneself to the degree that we care for the very basic needs of others. Now, we don't deal with this in our society very much these days, the washing of feet. Maybe in some parts of the country we do, but there are parts of the world where this is very common, and where it's very necessary. And I think it really illustrates how important it is. And one of the things about that's interesting about Annie Francis Lee's paintings is that you note that the face is not present in the two women. The face is blank. And this really, to me, illustrates that this could be anyone. This could be me. It could be you. It is a nondescript person that could be anyone. Anyone humbles themselves. Anyone can be humbled. And I will tell you that there is humility on both sides of this activity of washing of the feet, both for the person washing the feet as well as for the one whose feet are being washed. This is humility expressed in very important ways, and it really, as I said, it addresses the very basic needs of others, the very basic care. And when we're dealing with a healthcare environment, we are dealing often with people who need very basic care to help them feel better, whether it's physically or emotionally, mentally, or a combination of all of them. So let's keep in mind about the importance of humility. I think before we move on, I just want you to focus on this painting and the concept of what this expresses in terms of think about humility and think about humbling ourselves in the healthcare environment. As physicians, you humble yourself to serve your patients. That is a key attribute, a key quality of what it means to be a good physician, what it will mean to be a good medical student, what medical schools are looking for in their students. That I am not I am not the top. I am not the end of the line. I am not the greatest and best. And maybe you are. Maybe you're the smartest person in the world. Maybe you are the most amazing person that's ever lived. But you can still humble yourself and express and respect others in your daily life as well as in your expression of in a healthcare environment. So I want to remind you before we ask questions, or you can ask questions. I want to remind you that those of you who have not started your mapped free 14-day trial can definitely do that. It does a lot of things for you, calculate your GPAs, tracks activities. You can reflect on these core competencies that we've been talking about through your activities or even in courses. You can research the medical schools that you're interested in. And we also have a live weekly Ask the Dean pre-med Q&A for MAPT members. That's every Monday evening. And so if you haven't started a free trial, I'd encourage you to do that. It's a great way to keep track of everything. So Rachel, I think we're ready for some questions. I don't know if there's been some that have been expressed already, but anything that anybody wants to say or to otherwise ask about, then we can definitely talk about that.
Yeah, the number one question is always, will this be recorded? And the
Yeah.
if you're watching on Facebook, it'll be on the Facebook page. If you're watching on YouTube, it'll be on the YouTube page, or mapped.tv if that's easier for you. And yeah, seems like we've got a quieter bunch this week than last week. So guys,
Yeah.
questions, now's a good time to ask.
Yeah.
I think
Definitely.
one thing that comes to mind for me, you were talking about doctors talking at you versus with you.
Right. Right.
And I've definitely had both. And man, it makes a world of difference when
Oh,
they
sure
talk
does.
with you.
Sure does. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's interesting, and that even goes to the language that they use.
yes.
You know, if they're talking all these medical jargon, and I don't understand any of that stuff, so that's talking at me. That's not talking, with me and collaboratively.
Right. And I feel like I'm fairly fortunate in terms of vocabulary. Like I have a pretty strong one, and that might actually help in some cases because I know that I'm a fairly articulate, eloquent person. So if I don't know the word they're saying, I'm not embarrassed about it. I'm just like, oh, that's a new one. So I ask,
Right.
like
Right.
I had a dermatologist once tell me my skin was excoriated. And later I should have realized, like, oh, excoriated sounds like scored. But at the time I was like, what are you talking about? Like, oh, scratched up.
Right. Right. Right.
And it's something small like that. Like you learned it in med school, you're used to saying it, but taking that extra second to translate it to something, just a little bit more user friendly so that the patient feels safe and heard.
Right.
It makes a big difference.
Right. 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 Yeah, we got a few questions here.
All right. So let's look at this one here. How do we accept humility into our lives without seeming like a pushover?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And I'll go back to what we talked about in terms of gentleness. And that is humility is not about weakness. Humility is not about being a pushover, as the questioner expresses it. I think what humility is being gentle, but having a strength of purpose and a strength of character. So, as physicians or as medical students, we have a purpose, and that purpose can be expressed strongly, but in a gentle way, in a humble way. And so I think this is not about being a pushover. I think you can be a leader, but you can also be a leader that respects others and respects the opinions of others. This is very closely related to another questioner, which says, I was wondering if you think being a very competitive type of person, like a type A personality, is contrary to humility. And I think in some ways it is. It's counterintuitive for people who are, gung ho, and I'm going to do this, and I'm a type A person, and I'm striking out, but I think it takes humbleness, humility takes being intentional. And intentional is a very important word to all of this. It takes being very intentional. And for some of it takes being more intentional than for others. Some of us are just naturally, innately humble and innately have these sort of qualities about us, gentleness, etc. While others of us, it's contrary to our, so it takes really sort of that initiative and intentionality to make that happen.
Yeah, I agree. And I think I'll add on to that because this is such a good, important question. Because, I'm generalizing here, but a lot of pre-meds, I think, do feel competitive. And I'm not even necessarily talking about your personal attributes. I'm talking about like the way you feel, because the courses you're taking are arduous, because the percentage of people who apply to get into med school is not, super high. So I understand that sense of competition. And what I always go back to is something I hear Dr. Gray say a lot, which is put your blinders on, right? So, horses and horse races have those things at the sides of their eyes so that they're just focused on the track in front of them. I think being competitive towards yourself can be really healthy.
Oh yeah.
You know, I got a B in that last class and I thought about it and I realized I didn't really understand it. So I should have been taking advantage of the local study center at my campus, or, you know, now because of COVID, maybe you're doing Khan Academy, but like pushing yourself to be the best version of you. I think that's a really healthy kind of competition.
Oh, absolutely.
So just to the question asker, that's something I would think about, is can you channel it in a way that still keeps you grounded and down to earth?
Yes.
You know,
Yes,
and that I think it is
absolutely.
absolutely possible to be both
Oh,
if you
oh
are,
yeah.
and that sort of just underlines what Dr. Wright was saying about intentional, right? If you're
Absolutely.
intentional about it, then yeah, both can be done.
Absolutely.
Let's see, can you talk about, I'll put this one up.
Oh, yes,
Good one.
yes.
Could you
So,
talk about how to express humility while also talking highly of yourself in apps or personal statement?
yeah, this and so I think this is a very good question. And I think it really addresses how in the application is not your time to be taking a back seat. You know, this is and because in the application, the personal statement, you're not behaviorally interacting with someone. You are making you are talking about yourself. Now you can do it in a modest way and not be over the top, but I don't want you to get confused about humility in terms of you know, in the application, this is your time to shine. This is your time to talk highly of yourself, absolutely, and talk about how great you are and what a great physician you're going to be, and et cetera. But within the context of recognizing that that this is that, and not to be arrogant or over the top, but this is not, the application itself is not about interaction with others in a behavioral way, but it is the time to shine. And so I do draw a distinction between those two.
So how do we deal with seeing the opposite traits get rewarded in other people over and over in academic or corporate settings?
Yeah.
Yikes, that's a tough one.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it is, and this is why I said almost from the very beginning that humility is countercultural. It is counterculture, whether it's in an academic setting, or it's in a corporate setting, or it's in a political setting. You know, all of these, what we see frequently is the expression of arrogance, of bullheadedness, and, you know, bull in the china shop going forward, and I'm going to run over everybody in my way to get to the top, etc. But what I'm suggesting is that we have to focus on the patient. When you're in the exam room, even as a medical student, when you're in the exam room learning how to take a history or how to do a physical examination, or when you're in the clinical setting in third, fourth years of medical school or in residency, and you're dealing, and it's just you and the patient. I'm not talking about corporate setting. I'm not talking about academia. I'm not talking about politics. I'm talking about a situation where it's you and the patient, and how you deal with them in a way that's going to make them feel better, however they need to feel better. So I do think it is about often seeing the opposite characteristic getting rewarded, and this is a packed term here, rewarded. It depends a little bit on what we define as a reward. If all you define as reward is money or power, then absolutely these things are going to get the opposite is going to get rewarded. But I think it sometimes takes a redefinition of what is rewarding in our lives, and what's really important and what's really not important.
And, you know, I might even challenge that a little bit. I mean, definitely I've been in both academic and corporate settings where the bulldozer got their way.
Right.
But increasingly, the way the way patients get healthcare does rely some on patient choice. I mean, just
Yeah.
the very fact that we use the word patient to describe the person who you're taking care of
Yeah.
implies they wait on you, right?
Right.
Like,
Right. Right.
and I mean, there's always going to be an element of, emergency situations or geography where you just take the person who's available, or if you're in a hospital, like you're just going to the ER and getting whoever's there. But depending on your practice, someone who runs an office that isn't always 3 hours late, someone who engages with me and makes eye contact and gives me time to ask my questions, that's someone that I go back to. And I tell my friends I'm the kind of person that leaves Yelp reviews. So doctors that have not treated me well only got my copay and my insurance payment one time.
Yep.
Right.
And then
Because
I was
I
gone.
keep
Yep.
looking until I find someone who is humane.
Yes.
So
Absolutely.
there is, I think, I don't tend to think of it in terms of money first, but there's like this intersection, and it's kind of actually what MAP tries to do, of doing well, by which I mean making money by doing good. So if you are treating people well, then they enjoy getting healthcare from you, so then they come back to you. So I think there is a possible way, again, to thread that needle, much like with the competition and the humility, of finding both.
Yeah, absolutely. They don't have to be mutually exclusive.
All
Absolutely.
right. We probably got time for a couple more. Let's see. Someone asks, what are some of your favorite experience stories that demonstrate humility?
Wow. That's a good question. Oh gosh, let me think. My favorite stories. Well, it's kind of like what I was saying with my friend and the paint mixing story. I mean, that was humble. That was humility right there. When you're in the middle, it would be easy to get angry when you've got lavender paint dripping off your nose, to get angry at the situation and and fly off the handle or whatever. It takes a pretty humble person to say, "Well, boy, I screwed up. I really, didn't do well there," and to laugh at it. So I think that's a good example. I love laughter, and I love how laughter can disarm a situation, and especially when we can own something that we've done that's silly or difficult or whatever. So I think that's definitely a story that I love to talk about. I think it's humility. It's evidencing of a humble attitude when you can express that in a lot of different ways when you let somebody go in front of you in line at the grocery store, even though maybe you were first. I heard the other day about a man elderly man who was the it was because of social distancing. The person that was telling the story was 6 feet back from the in line, and the elderly man went in front of the person, not realizing that the person was there waiting, and so he went in line in front of her, and so she didn't really make a big deal out of it. She was just like, okay, whatever, and it's no big deal. Well, she gets up there, and the elderly gentleman doesn't have enough money to pay for what he's got, and so the person in line behind him, who he broke in line in front of, ended up making up the difference in paying for the what he was buying, and I think that's a wonderful story of humility, to say, I'm not going to get mad. I'm not going to get mad when I've been wronged. I'm just going to say, okay, it's not that big a deal, whatever. And then more than that, I'm going to reach out and I'm going to help this guy who broke in line in front of me. And I think that I heard that story the other day, and I thought it really expressed a pretty cool evidence of humility as well.
Yeah, that's great. Let's see. So somebody says, I wanted to go back to this one. It was a few minutes ago. In a healthcare setting, how could someone be gentle?
Yeah, I think gentleness is about, I think about it in terms of dealing with coworkers, dealing with other physicians, dealing with nurses or other healthcare workers, maybe when they've screwed up. or did something wrong or didn't do something they should have done, rather than flying off the handle, I deal with them gently and say, this was wrong. We should have done it this way, or you didn't do what I asked in the orders to do. We need to, make this, we need to take care of this instead of flying off the handle or whatever. That's an expression of gentleness. It's also an expression of gentleness when we deal with patients. One of the big problems with patient care often is the non-compliant patient. So the doctor orders something, labs or whatever, and the patient never goes. Or the doctor orders a prescription and the patient takes it half the time. And that's going to be incredibly frustrating for a physician. And so what I think the doctor has to do is deal gently with the patient and not aggressively. You're wasting my time. If you're not going to take the medicine, then what are we doing here? That's not gonna help the situation. That's not gonna help the patient ultimately to benefit.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, and just as someone who, I was using the example before of not knowing a word that my dermatologist used, she didn't laugh.
Yeah.
It's good to laugh at yourself, but
Yeah.
she didn't make me feel small for not knowing. So, it's not that I'm not as smart as that physician. It's just that she learned certain things. Like there's a difference between ability and intelligence. And
Yeah.
she's acquired a lot of intelligence in a specific area that I don't have. And she was humble enough to just realize, oh, okay, so this person just didn't know that word. And I've definitely seen doctors be a little smirky when I'm not following. And I don't think it's ever intentional, but they forget.
Yeah, we don't know that stuff. Yeah. Exactly.
And even you guys as pre-meds, I know it's so frustrating because you've got so much work to do and you've got such a sense of competition for your future years. But, an average pre-med is already in the academic elite of the entire world.
Yep.
So
Yep.
something you can do to be humble is just remember when people have different academic or learning experiences you, that doesn't mean that they're less than you. They just have had a different path.
Right. That's exactly right. Exactly right. Good.
Well, I think
Wow,
that takes us
it's
to
been a
the
great
end.
hour. Yeah, this has been great. Thank you all for attending tonight. And next week we're going to really deal with another very important concept, and that is self-awareness. And we'll talk about how important it is to be self-aware, and that'll be next week, and then we'll move on. But thanks to everyone for being here, and hope you enjoy your evening. And Rachel, I hope you have a good evening.
You too, Dr. Wright. This is great. I look forward to seeing you all next week.
All right. Take care, everybody.